Good Monday evening. It is November the 20th, 2017. Welcome to this week's weekly weather briefing, where I am starting the video out with a look at the entire United States as a whole. And you would think I wouldn't have the national radar turned on, but it is. Look out here towards the Rocky Mountains. Some very high terrain snow and rain showers are occurring at this moment, but for the majority, the entire country is fairly quiet. We're looking at rather chilly temperatures for this time of the year, but we're going to see a warm up ahead of this cold front right here that will move through tomorrow evening, late Tuesday evening, early Wednesday night, early Wednesday morning rather, and that is going to bring just a couple of high clouds into the area, not much in the way of any precipitation by any means, but it will usher in some very cold air for the Thanksgiving holiday, and that is because of this cold front. Now, notice our low pressure centers in portions of southern Canada, very high storm track for this time of the year, or very far north, I should say, and this is quite unusual to see as much cold air as we've been seeing, and then to also see the low pressure centers and the mean storm track so far north of here. Usually at this time of the year, a lot of our low pressure centers are tracking through the central plains and into the middle to upper Midwest, and that usually brings us a very enhanced threat of severe weather. Right now, this flip between fall and winter that we're about to undergo, if not already undergoing, is usually our prime time for severe weather because the jet stream begins to increase, and we also start to see the low pressure centers moving further south, which means that we're a little bit closer towards that unstable part of each warm sector of each low pressure center. So, with these being so far north, it's keeping the severe weather threat a little bit further away from here, and it's just been ushering in some raindrops every now and then some cold air afterwards. This is something that's going to continue, I think, even going into the month of December. This far northern storm track is going to continue, I think, and right now I'm a little bit on the fence on whether we see warm or cold air winning out for the month of December. Usually by this point, I'm kind of starting to give you some hints at what my forecast will be for the following month, but at this point, I'm still a little bit unsure, but I will have a final forecast for December coming up closer towards the end of this month and towards the beginning of December. So if we go ahead and look at what we have for this week, not much rain, if not, really not even any to begin with. This is a look at Wednesday morning and late Tuesday night, tomorrow evening. We have a couple of rain and snow showers. This is that cold front that I said would move through. A dry cold front for us. A lot of this that you see towards the northeast of here won't even be reaching the ground. A couple of flurries and a couple of raindrops could be rolled out in portions of northern Indiana, southern parts of Michigan, northwest Ohio, but for our region, maybe a couple of high clouds will move in, but nothing in the way of flurries or even snow or raindrops, so don't even get excited for anything like that. We get towards Saturday morning, late Friday night, we see another cold front move through. This is what's going to usher in much chillier air for the second half of your weekend, and this is going to arrive by Sunday. But I do think that we're going to, once again, get through another cold front with no rain to follow with it. So I think that the rain and snow that is with the Saturday cold front will remain off to our north and east, and we will just see the cold air come in with it, which I guess is okay, but we could use just a little bit more rain to meet our monthly average going into the rest of the month. And right now, here is a look at our 500 millibar pattern. This is for tomorrow evening. We see a trough in portions of the central Midwest down and towards the deep south, and we also look at the same time frame, but at a larger scale and a larger look, and we notice that we see this line right here, and this is the line that I'm very concerned about because this longitude or latitude line that stretches north to south right here, this is the line that I'm watching very closely on. If we see the trough, this mean trough right here, if it falls towards the west of this line or towards the east of this line. Both of them have some major implications for the month of December, and I'm watching this mean track of this trough right here very closely. So right now it's to the west of this line right here, and when it's to the west of that line, it allows for the trough in the east to be further towards the central United States, and it allows for the ridge in the west to really pump warm air into the central portion of the west. But what happens is as we go further out into time and we start to see this trough move off towards the east, and we see this ridge starting to move closer towards the central United States, moving closer towards our region. It happens because this trough right here, a piece of it splits off over here, and then another piece splits and goes down and doesn't really have any implication on our weather at all. So what happens when this happens is the ridge begins to move closer towards our region. We begin to see a little bit more of a warm-up and less of a threat for cold air. But once we get out towards this upcoming weekend, remember I mentioned the second half of the upcoming weekend would fall very chilly, and that's because we have a trough moving in. The GFS over the last couple of days really doesn't know what to do. It doesn't know where this trough wants to be. It doesn't know where this trough wants to be. Notice we have two separate pieces here of troughiness, and we have the ridge, the mean ridge right here. What happens during this same time frame, if we go and look at a larger scale view of it, this trough right here is now riding the fence on both the east and the west side of this line. And so right now, this is a very close watch pattern as we go into the very end of the month. I mentioned at the very end of October that I thought that the end of the month of November would end on a warm note. And if this ridge right here moves closer towards the east, and if it moves closer towards the east and that trough begins to move closer towards the east coast and just hugs the east coast, really, I think that our region in western Kentucky is considered the central part of the United States, not the eastern part of the United States. If we divided it east and west, we would be eastern. But if we're dividing it by the west, the central, and the east, we fall in the central part of the United States. And this trough right here, I think if we were forecasting for the eastern seaboard, is going to mean some chillier air for them going into the very end of the month. But I have forecasted for our region to end on a warm note. So while the East Coast might end on a chilly note, we might end on a warm note because this trough right here might move too far east. And if it falls to the east of this line right here, the ridge will begin to get pushed off towards the east as well. They're all influencing each other, and the more stronger this is, and the more it pushes, the more it's going to influence this big western ridge, which I would almost call a central ridge because it's trying to move closer and closer towards the east. Whether we have blocking over the top right here or not, I don't think has anything to do with the weather right now. It does, but I think that this right here, this trough, is really influencing our pattern, and a lot of meteorologists aren't really talking about it, but I'm watching it very closely. So none of this central United States is really seeing anything in the way of precipitation over the next week. Here's our temperatures, and we notice a lot of ups and downs. There's that cold front, dry cold front moving through Tuesday evening. It allows our temperatures for the Thanksgiving holiday to fall into the 40s and lower 50s. And we're looking at upper 20s to middle 20s for lows. I think we get even colder than what this is showing right here. We see another warm up by Saturday. Some of us might even be reaching the 60s. And then we see another fall back to some chilly air for the second half of your weekend. And we also see maybe a gradual warm up. Remember, this is that ridge that I think might try to move an inch closer towards our region coming into the very end of the month. The warmer end of the month note that I mentioned all the way back into the end of October, it might be actually shaping out for our region. But there are some implications that once we get further into the month of December, that we might start to see a more colder pattern settle in for this part of the country and actually stay in our part of the country for some time. This is a look at the 30 HPA levels, so we're looking at pressure up into the higher parts of the atmosphere, the geopotential height anomalies, and we notice right here that we see a split of the polar vortex. We see one piece right here, and we see another piece over here. And what this does during the fall and winter months is when it splits, and we have one piece coming for the central portion of North America into portions of Canada, it usually equals much chillier air for our part of the country going into, about 10 to 15 days after this split occurs. So I do think that if this split does occur, and this is preliminary, this is 192 forecasted hours out, so this is not by any means going to happen. But if it does, then going into the month of December, while we might start with a warm note, like I've mentioned, in November on a warm note, start December on a warm note, I think that once we get further into that first week of December, we might start to see some more chillier air moving into our portion of the country, but just something to watch. So here's what we've seen so far for the month of November, and it couldn't go any better with what my forecast was for our anomalies. Here was my anomaly map that I made right here, and you notice that I have temperature anomalies for this part right here. I see some very warm temperature anomalies for the southeastern portion of the United States and some very cold temperature anomalies up here. And we look at what this has so far for the month of November, And we have fell very close to that. I'm very proud of the map that I put together, the years that I chose for my analogs. And as I mentioned, we would be riding the line right through there, and so far we have. This will change some more as we go throughout the rest of the month of November, but for right now, it looks like the cold air is going to continue to try to push, but then we're also going to have some warmer periods as well. You saw back here on our temperature map a lot of ups and downs. So the cold and the warm both had a fight with each other, both occurring right on top of our region. And this is something that I told you I think is a preliminary outlook for what the winter ahead of us has for us. I think that this is something that is going to be expected going into the winter season, is this fight back and forth. Now, not only does that make it difficult for me to forecast, makes it difficult for a lot of people to plan for what the winter is going to have for us and as we move forward. So this is still preliminary as far as what I think is going to happen for the month of December, but right now it looks like the fight is going to continue to happen. But a final December outlook will be coming out going into the closer towards the end of the month. But this was this weekly weather briefing. Hopefully, you got some information on. We have a very dry week ahead, so there wasn't much that I could talk about for this week's weather. So I tried to find something a little bit more long range, a little bit more interesting than what we usually talk about. So hopefully you grab something from this. If you have any questions or comments, make sure and leave them below.